So I'm going to put you all on mute. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, allowing your feet to come and touch the earth if they can. Probably the thing that is closest to you that's touching the earth is the floor. And just really you're feeling your feet on the floor. Feeling the miracle of your feet. These things that carry you all day long. And I'm going to invite you to start breathing, just noticing your breath. And as you do that, I'm going to also just invite you to celebrate the miracle of your feet, of these things that carry you, and maybe all of the things that carry you. And perhaps as you're breathing, you just might want to come into this state of gratitude today for the most simple things, beginning with your feet. And so in this moment, I'm going to invite you to really bring every bit of yourself, every single bit of yourself that you can possibly muster into this moment, because you've given yourself a gift. You've given yourself a whole hour to step out of time as you know it, and to step into this place of wonder and learning and opening about who you are as a creator. Your unique matrix, your unique program, and what you are here to create, what you are here to give. How does the genius flow through you? Some of you already spoke to the wisdom that is in you, that is ready to be spoken and told again and again. I can't help but notice that we are in a particular configuration of a lot of elders in the room today. What an honor to have so many people that are walking in with wisdom and are choosing to share it. And so I'm going to ask you to take a moment to commit this hour as if we're in a state of practice, to commit this hour of listening for the self, for the other, really listening for yourself. To commit this in service to something beyond you. One of us spoke about, and I wish I could remember your name, but one of us spoke about really wanting to be able to tell stories that hold hope and a vision for the future for the young ones. She's already stated what she's here in commitment to, what she's here in service to. So just as if this was a yoga praxis, can you commit your act of deep listening in service to something today? And I'm going to begin with a quote. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or hate, to see or be seen, and often, too often, stories saddle us, and they ride us, and they whip us onward, and they tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. The task of learning to be free. I'm going to repeat that again. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. Rebecca Solnit says that quote. Jerry asked for some creative prompts, so I am going to intersperse our day with creative prompts. This is her special gift that she is giving you. And what a great example this is, right? All we have to do is ask. I was just listening to Carolyn Casey. If you guys don't know about Carolyn Casey, visionary activist show, it's Grace again. I always love getting to see Grace, graced by Grace. Then listen to her show, because she's so on fire, and she's such a brilliant woman who speaks so clearly about language and storytelling, and she's connected to astrology, right? But anyway, she was just speaking to that, you know, how to make agreements with the unseen world, and that you have to ask. You know, that's one of the things, like the gods, the deities, our allies in the unseen world. You know, there's a rule that's known and understood that you must ask in order for them to be able to help you. So Jerry asked, for creative prompts, and so her ask is my pleasure today. And so going right off of this first quote, you know, the task of being of learning how to be free, right, inspires you to, you know, to really be able to see what a story is, to name that story, to take a moment and actually stop the show before you consciously choose or unconsciously choose to join and become part and play a role in that story, to name it, and then become part of the show if you choose to or not to. One of my favorite games is flipping the story lately, and we'll get to do that later. So in honor of Jerry's request, my first invitation, I'm just gonna throw out prompts, and you will be able to do them later, is take the story of wearing a mask. Here's a hot topic in our society today, right? And everyone has such different stories about them. Some people are holding the story of fear. Oh my God, I'm protecting myself. Some people are holding the story of rebellion. How dare you take my freedom away by asking me to wear a mask? You know, my wonderment is around the power of costumes. That's what I was thinking about this morning while I was watering my garden. You know, costumes are powerful. They do help us embody and take on certain archetypal energies. But may we be strong enough to never lose ourselves, understand it's just a costume, you know. So, you know, there's that. And then there's the story of I'm protecting others. I'm just simply protecting others by wearing a mask. So if you want to play, and if you want to play, and someone was asking about how do we, I think it was Ellie saying, hey, how do I take stories and put them into the, for children, right? One of the quickest ways that we can take a story, we can even take a story about a mask, right? Because this is an ongoing conversation with children these days. And you can take it into a mythic dimension, and you can make a story about, and I learned this one time from a man from Lakota tradition. He was in his mid-30s, and he was talking story, and he was talking about how he'd lost his tradition with teaching stories. And that teaching stories, as I understand them, it's like a third parent in the room. You know, they'll do the work. It's like the nanny, you know, but like, how do we call on them? So he was realizing that he had this young child who was misbehaving in all kinds of ways when we went ceremony and taking food from people's plates and butting in line. And he caught himself in the no way of being, and he was very embarrassed by it. And then he realized that he had forgotten how to engage. One of the oldest parts of his tradition was the story and the teaching story. So they went home and they made up a story about good otter and bad otter. And good otter does these things and bad otter does these things. You know? And who does he want to be, this little boy? So now when they go out and he's doing all the things, you know, his father can just say, are you being good otter or bad otter? You know, and it separates the behavior, right? So there's all kinds of amazing parts about calling on the story. And now the story's doing the work for you. It's amazing. You just called on it. So, so you know, you might want to create a teaching story by putting it into a mythic dimension, calling on the animal spirits, the animal guides for what their wisdom might be if they were having to wear a mask, and have some play with it. Okay, so I'm already wildly off script. Congratulations. You're doing a great job of shaping this class just for you, which I highly recommend because it's so much more fun. And so anytime you have questions, by all means, please, please, please place them in the comments or raise your hand. And the lady's name who has a show, Carolyn Casey, the Visionary Activist Show. Okay, so let us begin with a little playing over here. So here's what we're going to do today. We are going to, I guess we just jumped right in, just like any good story, it starts in the middle, and that's what we really did. But let me take you back a little bit. We're going to, I'm going to talk a little bit about, and we've already started, the landscape of storytelling as a sacred art form. We're going, this class moves very fast. I try to fit a lot into an hour. And one of my teachers, Stephen Jenkinson, says, I'm just going to shoot arrows out among you, and some of the arrows are going to land and some of them aren't, and that's okay. You'll get a video of this afterwards, and maybe, you know, one was meant for you and one was meant for someone else. That's why I always say, make sure that you know what you're coming for so that you can have your spidey ears listening for it. We're going to work with specifically how to work with story as a tool for transformation and healing. And let's look at that word transformation right now, because it's so abused and molested, and you know, it's like transformation is changing the form. So how do we work with story as a way of changing a form of how we're living, or what roles we're playing in our lives, or how we're telling the stories, or even how we're making up stories about the future. So we're going to really look at story as a tool to change form. What does it mean to be a conscious creator in our times? This is a big question, and I'm going to ask you guys questions throughout our time, and they're real questions. I love getting to hear your answers and your voices, and so just know that when I ask those questions, it's not me just talking out loud to myself in that moment, and you can either raise your hand or put your thoughts into our chat box. And we're also going to play with what is your apocalyptic archetype. This is my favorite game of all time to play right now. And then at the end, that's going to be the class. I promised a vision story at the end to someone. So after the class is officially done, I'm going to talk to you about a class that I'm teaching right now. So for those of you who are interested, you can stay for that. And then after that, whoever is still around and wants to play, we're going to co-create a vision story together, which is a fun little thing to do. A little bit about me. I grew up on a farm in Vermont and moved very often between Vermont, Virginia, and New York City. And that moving really gave me the opportunity of always knowing what it is to be the new kid and getting lots of different environments. And in that, I also found stories, and stories saved my life right off the bat, because there's mean kids in every town, I'll tell you. And when you're a new kid, it's easy to meet them. So stories saved my life. They gave me a way to escape the world that I was in. They gave me a way to journey to places I'd never been before. And they gave me a way to learn about the world, to learn way more about the world than the people around me. I learned about the power of story as I began to grow up, and I was very lucky. I had parents who identified gifts in me at a young age, and they really cultivated my writing and theater, and I ended up working with a professional theater company when I was very young, and then went on to study theater professionally in New York City. And I got to see what was happening in that space. I got to see that this energy, this palpable shape and form and aliveness came forward, that there was this magic that happened in the room. And I also really became curious about, how do you make the most of it? Like, how do you work with that energy? And that question took me on a journey. It took me to get a master's degree in social work and really understanding about social change and community organizing, and how the human body and human brain and human spirit, what they need to heal. And it also took me to work with Al Gore at his television network. And this greater inquiry of how do we use story to catapult social change. And I was working with this I was working against my own grain, but I was working with what I thought we needed to, which was what is the information that people need to get them to motivation, to activation, information, inspiration, activation, motivation, activation. Look, I love it. I forgot my own recipe because it doesn't work. It was the wrong question. I love that. Sometimes you just have to ask the wrong question to know where the right one is. And I learned that it wasn't about information. It was really about story, that we are story. We're made of story. And we make meaning of the world through story, not through information. And wow, we get a lesson on that right now in our world when you can't tell what's real and there's so much different information and it's coming from all different places. And what do we need more than anything is a story that we can share, I would say. So I ended up working with Al Gore for many years, producing the Green Channel and being a part of this climate change conversation and narrative. I can go on and on and on about that, but I'll spare you. And as I came out of that, I came closer and closer and closer to the truth of my truest heart's desire, was really understanding that it was a story that could carry us through these times. And that we were surrounded by dangerous stories about our future, or dangerous stories about humans' role on the planet. And I wanted to play a healing role, and I understood that my medicine came through story. And so I started working on a really big story, and it's called The Whale Dreamer. I'm really excited to get to share it with you someday, very soon, I hope. And it took me to traveling to very remote places in the world, and coming into years of just deep, deep listening as I listened for and carried the story in. And through that, I also began to really understand the oldest nature of working with story was through ritual. The very first actor was actually doing a ritual to imbibe and invite Dionysus here, And as I began to come back to the roots of theater and the roots of where it was, this natural collaboration with story, ritual, theater, ceremony, healing emerged. And we started doing large scale story ceremonies, and it's been wild fun. And it's much more fun when you can be in person, but that's how it is. And here we are today. So let's call on some ancient wisdom about the role of story. And Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or to set it into motion. And Sicilians believe that words poke holes in the universe. And Australians say that the past must be sung to the present so that the future can exist. Maori say that words don't describe a thing, they are the thing. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I'm going to say that again because it always blows my mind. When we consider ourselves as creators, and we could go into a million different religious beliefs. I'm not going to go into any of that. I'm just going to come into that human's instinct is to create. We can't help but build and make things and do things, right? And so when we start to look at our power, our potency, our capacity for creating, that this ancient code, this ancient hint about our unique role on the planet, is that all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. So if there's any plea that I might make to you in the name of creation, it is what words, what do you speak into being? And I recently was reminded and by Brooke Medicine Eagle, who is a beautiful elder keeper who taught us as part of the speaker series that was spoke last week. And she was talking about that prayer, the power of prayer and calling things in. And it reminded me of this moment of when I was in a ceremony. It was an all-women's ceremony, and it was by the fire, late into the night, and something started to come over us. And a lot of people started to fall asleep. I'd never seen anything like this before. I started to get really scared. And so in my fear, I started to speak my fear out loud. And one of my elders went, "Don't you dare do that. This is when you pray for your life. You speak what you want. You claim your life by calling that forward. That's what you give your voice to. That's what you give your prayer to." And so I carry her wisdom over to you. In this moment, when like the fear body is so alive, and we're in the motion, we're the bridge builders, storytellers, we're bridge builders. We are creating these other little pods of places where people can live and exist. And we're seed planters, we're building the gardens, you know. And so what are the stories that you're gonna carry? Are they stories of horror, of fear? You know, or are they stories of vision, hope, and medicine? You can have a story of grief. You know, you can face exactly what's happening straight on, while also carrying the medicine and the vision for hope. Hope is such a dangerous word, but there you go. It just came out. Okay, I'm wildly off script. This is great. You guys are so fun. Okay, so let's talk about it. What is a story? What is a story? This is a real question. And Mary's saying, our old Hawaiian saying, there is life in the word, there is death in the word. You claim your life. Yes, I love that. There is life in the word, there is death in the word. Thank you, Mary, for sharing that. Living it. Okay, so what is a story? So this is a real life question I'm asking you. And you know, we've got some ringers in the room, so I know that we're gonna have some answers emerge. And you can either raise your hand and take yourself off mute, or you can place it into the chat box, whichever is your pleasure. What is a story? This is also one of those moments where you can play it, a couple different things. So there's that impulse of noticing your intuition, right? Some of you don't have anything to say, and that's great. We're in the listening. Isn't it so beautiful to know, no, I'm just here to listen. And some of you can feel a little tickle in your being, you know, and you might be resisting it. You might be resisting that little tickle that's saying to speak, and that's okay. And some of you, this is that part of knowing when it's your turn to speak. And sometimes we can feel it, but we don't even know it's supposed to happen. So that's when we come into that place of practicing eloquence. And so eloquence, you know, again, I'm quoting one of my elder teachers, Stephen Jenkinson, it's not about being crafty or clever with what you're saying. It's not even about being right. It's about something else. It's about listening so deeply to the moment and being willing to speak to it. So eloquence, you might place your feet on the earth, take a nice deep breath, allow the inspiration just to come right on through. And be generous with your succinctness. How can you speak to just the essence of what needs to be spoken? The question is, what is a story? That was the question. Ella's saying a story to me is metaphoric summation of experience across time. She said so many things, beautiful. So let's say it's a metaphor. So metaphor, what is metaphor? But it's the language of spirit. So you know, immediately we know that we're in a multidimensional conversation, and it's a summation of experience across time. So it's not about facts and information. If I'm going to tell you a story about going to the post office, I'm not going to just go, well, yeah, I got my keys and I went to my car and I got in and I drove 10 miles down the road and then I got there, I took my box. No. I went to the post office and you would not believe who was in line. This guy started telling me about how he was dreaming. I don't even know why he was telling me that he was dreaming and how he got inspired to tell me about his dreams. But there he is, he's telling me about these dreams that he had about learning about how to be a creator and how he was in these white robes and how he had these like balls of chi and that was his dream. Okay, that was me at the paint store just yesterday. I kid you not. This guy did that. So anyway, so I'm not telling you about going to the paint store because I got some new paint. I'm telling you the story because there's something in it for you. Oh my gosh, he's having this extraordinary teaching about what it is to be a creator. And I looked at him and I was like, wow, what an exceptional way to live out your mythic existence, because here you are dreaming about the power of being a creator on this planet, and you have taken on a job where you give people the tools to create with the hardware store. Beautiful. Okay, so Annette is saying a story is a way to tell your truth in a way that others can hear you. Tell your truth in a way that others can hear you. You know, John Steinbeck says that your story must be about your readers or it will not last. Okay. That means that there's got to be a universal truth, you know, about your story. So when I tell a story about, you know, my experience of being diagnosed with cancer, you know, if I was just talking about, there's a process that we go through when we tell a story, especially when we tell a hard story. So sometimes when we have something that we're working out, there's trauma or upset or disruption, we don't know what it's about. Sometimes we can call people in and we can ask for a listening circle. I need you to listen to me. You know, in the Me Too movement, there needed to be a space for women and men to be heard and believed about the trauma that they've experienced. You know, so that's step one, this listening, this being witnessed. And there's a progression that happens. And there comes a moment when you start to find the universality in your expression, and you start to take not the story about what happened to me, Leah Lamb, you know, in 2002, but more of what is happening to the expression of my soul in its great journey. And what was the initiation that I was going through, that I was given, that I either said yes to or no to. Hopefully if I'm telling the story, because I said yes to it, or perhaps it's a teaching story and a warning about the consequence of when you say no to an initiation. So now I've taken it into this universal thing. It's not about cancer, it's about an initiation. We all get initiated, you know, but we don't live in a culture that understands or recognizes them. So as storytellers, we get to reclaim some of the most oldest parts of our culture by bringing them back and bringing meaning and context to it. Okay, so, and then there comes a moment when you take that story and you give it away as a gift, and it's no longer about you, it's about something bigger. And that's that wisdom keeping. That's that you've harvested your gems and you've shined them all up, and now they're ready to be given away as a gift. And now you're not saying, please listen to me because I need this energy, I need this understanding. You're saying, no, here, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you a seed to plant in that garden of yours. Shannon's saying, say your invitation again. What is it that you're inviting? Oh, I asked people to talk about what is a story. So I am going to kind of come into a very unglorified, unpoetic expression of what a story is. Grace, you've heard this so many times. I get a little self-conscious when you have to hear the same thing over and over again. See, but you inspire things to come out differently. So the unpoetic version is, you know, if we understand that stories is very complex, multidimensional thing, it speaks through metaphor, the language of spirit, all of these things. Another way of looking at a story, you know, it's a prism, right? Depending on where you're standing, you're going to see something else, is that it's an operating system. And it's an operating system where we learn our beliefs, our values, and what we believe is possible. And if you go to the codes, you know, the secret codes that are embedded all around us, right? And they're embedded in our language. Look, even they call it television programming. Right? I mean, could it be more obvious? You know, I love that. I just discovered that a couple months ago. Oh, thank you. I put on the eyeshadow just for you. So when we look at this operating system, now we can start to become aware that, okay, so there's been some programming that's happened. It's happened through our families, it's happened through our culture, it's happened through our society, you know, it's happening through the news, it's happening in all different kinds of ways. Now we can start choosing our programming. We're like, okay, well, what stories am I going to choose to allow to come into me, or what stories am I going to choose to run me? You know, what stories am I going to choose to take part of? And this is where your, you know, author is related to authority. So where is your self-authority when you author your own story? And I say, if you're not writing the story, you might get stuck in playing a role in somebody else's. And what are we doing right now? But we're in this wild time of not living completely in a shared story. But also, what is the wild time of this is that Corona has given us? Is that for the first time that I've been alive or even really am aware of, the entire planet has an opportunity to share a story. Now, I love that expression of we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. So we're not all playing the same role. We don't even all agree what the story is. But nonetheless, we've got the same characters in it. It's a phenomenon. And so as storytellers, this is an amazing moment to get ahead of the story, to claim the meaning of it. So, what's a sacred story? If we understand what a story is, what's a sacred story? Thank you, Grace. Sacred story. There's no wrong answer. We're just playing. And if you haven't figured it out, you guys are just inspiration for me to keep it fresh. Whatever you say.
I guess I would say a sacred story is one that has that universal truth that you spoke of, because there's lots of stories that don't have that, and I wouldn't necessarily call those ones sacred stories.
So it has a universal truth. It has something that's resonating, I would say, and it has something in it that I'm gonna go a little bit further, because truth is a naughty word. It's so confusing. You know, they can get into some good, you know, what does Cillian say? Words poke holes in the universe. You know, you can get into some good fights over truth. But right, there's a universality that lives inside them. There's many people can find themselves living in this story. I'm hearing Valerie say, Shannon saying, a sacred story is one that takes you inside of yourself, right? You know, I've been thinking more and more that story is a sanctuary, it's a temple. What if we look at story? It's a sanctuary that people can go into. And when they're living inside this story, they can have access, they can have relationship to the divine, to that creative life force that's present. And so as a storyteller, and the other thing that's really rather extraordinary about a story, and that when you start thinking of it as a sanctuary, is that they can also see themselves. Here we're going back to what Quinn was saying about that universal truth, that they can see parts of themselves that maybe they didn't want to look at, that they didn't want to see. And they can see it in private. You know, when you're telling your story, you have no idea what's going on through my mind. That you are waking up all different kinds of things, memories, ideas, perspectives. You might show me a reflection of myself that I hadn't had the courage or willingness to see until you were willing to look at that part in you and name it and claim it. You know, but I can have time to metabolize it. So so, and when we look at the stories, that then who are you as a storyteller? But the builder of the temple, the keeper of the temple, and the guardian of the temple. You know, so it's quite a role to play. Amy says sacred stories affirm life. And yes, I really, really agree with this. You know, so I think of a sacred story, it's something that it has something in it that is in support of life. And I would say in support of life thriving, all life thriving. And so there's something, and I just put that word in the all of life. So there's a wholeness in it. And so what do we know of whole, H-O-L-E? It's also connected to holy. When we think things are being holy, we're also saying that they're whole. Oh my gosh, so that means that there's space in a sacred story for us to get out of the confines of good and bad, you know, right and wrong. There can be space for all of it to live together and understanding it. It's intrinsic interdependence. So now when we're looking at the wholeness of a story, we can take the bad guy and flip it and turn him into a master teacher. This is my favorite game. Here you go. Jerry, this is your second creative prompt. So take someone in your life that's really a humdinger of just driving you kind of crazy. They really are pissing you off. They rock you off your center. You can call them any kind of swear word that you want. The more heat and anger you have about them, the better. It might be your neighbor, it might be a family member. Hopefully it's not your beloved. It might be a political leader. And now flip their role from being the bad guy to being your master teacher who has come in service of your soul. And they have come to call out a gift in you that has not had an opportunity to emerge yet and wouldn't if they didn't give you the conflict and constriction of this particular moment. What do we know about the birth canal? It requires a lot of constriction to make it through into this new field of life. Okay, so now we're in the form of initiation. Oh my gosh, I'm being initiated by a master teacher. Oh, thank you so much. You can smile sarcastically. It's great. But what if you actually, it's like I don't know about you, but I've been taking a lot of, I find a lot of grounding in listening to some of our elder master teachers, and the Dalai Lama. Guy's always smiling, always smiling. And there's wisdom in being able to smile through even what appears to be the most horrific thing. And as storytellers, we have this extraordinary gift not to ever get stuck in seeing anything as independent, but understanding that it's part of the whole. There's an old story that says, what looks like a curse could be a blessing. What looks like a blessing could be a curse. It means that you're constantly in motion and that you know that one moment is always connected to the next. Each chapter is connected to the other. So when we look at this ability to take someone who looks like the bad guy and flip them and turn them into the master teacher, it flips our role as well, because we're no longer the victim. And now, I just ended up in a really interesting situation where someone in my world was really in a situation where they had taken on this victim role. And I was like, wow, what a trap, because I don't get to hold them accountable for something when they're in that role, which means it takes out their self-authority. Shoot, what a trap this is. So when you can maneuver, and I'm not saying that people aren't victimized, I really want to be careful and walk very tenderly through this space. Okay, so I look at this through the lens of storytelling and as roles. So that's I just want to speak to that as we walk tenderly, and that storytelling can be therapeutic, but we're not meeting this as therapy. And so when we walk through this, we're like, okay, if we flip the story and we flip the bad guy, and now we flip ourselves, we're no longer a victim to the bad guy, and now we are in the initiation, and now we are choosing our journey of initiation and what it's calling out in us and the greatness that's being called out in us. And what's our role in this? Are we the Jedi? Are we the priestess? Are we the magician? It's like, whoo, now we've got a whole new game to play. And it's life enlivening. And so they can come at you and they can still be a jerk, but you might be able to say, oh my gosh, you're teaching me about compassion and pain and suffering. Okay. I can hold you in that rather than you just trying to make my life miserable. Totally different story, a totally different way of meeting the moment. So it's one way that we can take our other stories and apply them into our own lives. So the other last thing I'm going to talk about sacred storytelling is that, looks like we're going to go a little bit over. I'm sorry, we got a little bit offline today. But so in terms of a sacred story, it's also a trap, because the second we call one thing sacred, we're calling something else not sacred. Okay, so you understand that there's a trap. And that what does the sacred have? It has the divine inside of it. We're saying, I see the life in you. I honor the life in you. And so when we're saying something is a sacred story, we're saying, I honor that there's life in this, that there's the creative life force, the muse, that there's a wild collaboration with the unseen world. So I'm not using a story. If you want to look at the etymology of using, you can trace it back to slavery. Okay, so I'm not going to enslave a story to manipulate you to buy something. Okay, that's not what's going to happen. That's not a sacred story. I'm not going to use a story to scare you into buying something or to thinking less of yourself, that you need something more. A sacred story fills you with life. It nourishes you. You feel enlivened. So I invite you, as your non-creative prompt, but as your super spidey, story spotter, to start looking all around you at the news stories, at the TV shows, at the movies, at the stories that you're telling about the world and about yourself in the world. Are those sacred stories? Are you honoring yourself by allowing your own story to be sacred? And that means that maybe not thinking that you know the story. I feel like a sacred story, I love telling sacred stories because here's the secret. I get the day off. All I have to do is follow the story. It's following that creative life force. It's not thinking that I have to have all the answers or know where the middle is or know how it's going to end. It's about being in a committed, devoted relationship with a collaboration of listening. Okay. So I promised you that we would talk about, let's do the creator archetype just because it's so fun. Okay, the apocalyptic archetype. So apocalypse. Gina is saying, I've been told to be careful of the use of the word remember when telling my story about lupus and healing lupus. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know exactly about that, but I have listened to Dr. Joe Dispenza, who speaks about when you tell your body something, And so were you saying that you should use the word remember, or are you saying like, it's like you don't want to tell yourself that you have something, when it's past, so, back in the day that happened, so yeah, you want to be, your body is always listening to you, so that I can't speak the specifics of that, but it's a good point to bring up. So we're going to play this game called Claim and Name Your Apocalyptic Archetype. And apocalypse, Michael Mead, another phenomenal teller in our time, who is really worth listening to, and talks a lot about, he is another person that pulls apart the words. And the etymology of apocalypse is that it means, it's Greek, and it means the lifting of the veils. So it's really about seeing what's really here. So, wow, this is a whole different world order, right? It's like, wait a second, apocalypse, I grew up thinking that the apocalypse was the end of the world. But then when you go back to the secret codes, again, the codes to understanding the world are in the word. Look at that. It's all right there, right in the words, And so when you understand that some of our words have been hijacked and are being used against us, it's not the end of the world. It's the end of the world as we knew it. Wow, it's not like racism and economic injustice just happened. It's like, no, we have more capacity than ever to be able to name things, to see them, to name them, and to change them. So it's a wild time because things are changing. We left the world as we knew it. We're entering into something else. But this is a magical time because what is chaos? What is it? It is the beautiful compost, the rich fecundity for creators. Chaos is where creators thrive. So again, when you claim yourself as a creator in chaos, it's not that you're not going to be affected by the changing and the falling of systems, but you're not in the story of, oh my God, I'm Chicken Little and the sky is falling. No, you're in a different story. You're in that story of magician, creator. Oh, okay, well, the top of that roof fell down. Now it's a magical rug. Okay, how do I write on this? And so, what I would speak to is that this is a very potent time to become devoted to the emergent creative life force. Anyone know what I mean by I say, what is the emergent creative life force? What does that mean? I know this is a scratching of the head. I always like, whenever I go to my brain, like whenever I start like wrinkling my forehead, I know that it's over. And I try to take all my energy and I go, poof, and I put it up here. And that's where, the muses are often hanging out. They're not inside my body, they're often out here. And I can catch the inspiration. Another quick trick for you, Jerry, is that when you're doing one of these creative prompts and you get stuck, getting up to get a glass of water, go to the bathroom. I worked with this really extraordinary Broadway director, and he said it was the bathroom phenomenon. You know, whenever they were working on a script and they got stuck, as soon as someone got up and went to the bathroom, boom, the inspiration came through. So sometimes it's about like leaving the field of where there's constriction and go sweep the floor, water the plants, wash some dishes, you know, chop wood, carry water, and then the muse gets to, you get out of your brain, you start listening, and then the inspiration comes faster than anything. That's my great little trick. Gina is saying that the emergent creative life force, new ways of looking at things or finding solutions to things, right? And Amy is saying that which is within each of us that expresses ourselves, our viewpoints, and our gifts, right? So here's one, I'm going to give you another creative prompt. This is a journal exercise. Every single, emergent creative life force equals God, says Shannon. So one thing that you can do every morning, if you want to play with your emergent creative life force, what is a creative life force? Is every morning in your journal, write down what is the emergent creative life force want to do today through me? Where is the life? Where is my life most turned on, most joyful? And just make your list, you know. And then if you really want to make a study of it, what I like to do is I'm sorry I don't have an example of this. I like to, put a line straight down my page. And so on the left side, it says, what does my emergent creative life force want to do? And on the other side, at the end of the day, I answer this question. What did I do? What did I actually do? And do that for 5 days in a row. Where is my life force? Where does it really naturally want to go? Because I really truly believe that in times when, in great shift, when the world is changing so much, and so much is dying, when we can become so attuned to our internal navigational systems, it is always going to point towards life. And so when we can tear away those ideas of who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to be, how things are supposed to be, and get that kind of noise out of our psychic space, and we're coming into a place of psychic silence, you know, we can start to hear what the creative life force wants to do. She might just want to sweep all the floors and clean out all the corners and clean out all the closets. And that just might actually be what will bring her great pleasure today. Or maybe all she wants to do is sit in water. When you go sit in water, the greatest inspiration comes. Or maybe your nervous system is finally calmed. Or maybe there's this book that you keep hearing. You're like, God, I want to write that story. Oh, I want to write that story. Now I'm going to go answer the emails. Oh, I really want to write that story. Now I'm going to paint a new room. You know, it's like, just start watching yourself. This is one of the quickest, easiest ways to start watching who you are as a creator. Where's your impulse? That's the creative life force. You know, it's like when I studied acting in New York City with Senator Meisner, lesson number 1, follow your impulse. It was another way of saying, follow that creative life force. Another way of saying, listening to the muse, listening to the guides, listening to the ancestors, listening to the earth speaking out loud. All different, all the same thing, different language, the unseen world. So when we speak about that being able to follow that, now we're talking about going back to, okay, if we're in apocalyptic times, but now we've reclaimed it as being this really cool time to be on the planet, you know, and like, wow, the curtain is back. We get to see Oz. We get to see really there. We claim ourselves as creators in this great magical world. What if we could create anything? What kind of Oz would you create? And so now we're coming back to this question of that genius that runs through you. And as Michael, some of you are kind of like shivering at the idea of genius. I'm not genius. Well, let's take that shivering, that voice. Maybe it's the critic, maybe it's doubt, whatever it is for you, the comparing mind, and just take it to the side and let it sit at the table next to you and clear that away. First for now. Give it a dunk in cold water, and now come back and say, okay, that genius, as Michael Mead says, it's you were born with it. It's just that thing that you have to give. I just learned, don't quote me on this, that the word human in Mayan means you have to give something back. It's like you come in with a debt. You know, it means that you came here to give something. Don't quote me on that, but it's a kind of a fascinating concept. I'm gonna go look it up more. So when we look at, okay, we all came with something to give. We all have this capacity to create. Some of us create by making other children. You know, some of us create by making gardens, some of us create by making stories. There's so many different ways to work with that creator energy. And now we're coming back once again and saying, okay, archetype, that universal energy, we understand archetypes as being, you know, there's, we can look at it through the lens of the feminine, which is the maiden, you know, the queen, the crone. Those are three classic archetypes from the feminine. We can go a little bit wilder and go, oh, the lover, the magician, the muse. Now we can, the wise woman, you know. Now we can kind of back it up even more and get out of the definitions and say, yeah, but what is, when the veil is lifted and I can come to the truest essence of myself, right? The veil has been lifted and I'm no longer valued by what, you know, society has deemed, and especially in the United States, I know we have a lot of Canadians among us, but in the United States, you know, we've definitely been fallen into the trap of, you know, if you do this job, you are then deemed value at this rate, right? You know, what a trapping, right? And so it doesn't necessarily, you know, I know someone, he is, I would say his archetype is love button. I mean, he cannot resist being friendly and kind to every single person he walks by in the world. It's a little bit annoying at times for me as we're walking down the street, but I have to just take a step back and just be like, his archetype is lover. He's the lover. It's what he is in his fullest expression. You know, and so, and no, he doesn't get paid for it, you know, but it doesn't mean it isn't the truth of what he is. The absolute truth of what he is. And when we can claim that, we can, it amplifies, you know, and it has more and more space to live among us. So I'm going to invite you now to come into that inquiry of what is your true essence, your truest essence, you know, in meeting these times that we're in. And can you put a really fancy, fun, playful title on it? I really like fancy, fun, playful titles, you know, as we claim our apocalyptic archetype. You know, I would say that one of my archetypes is to be a bridge builder. So I might call myself queen of the fanciful bridges. I could do better. We could do better titling, you know, but it's like, what is your truest essence that brings you so much joy as you look at the world and the world that you most want to live in? What part of your being will carve the path to the world you most want to, the world you most want to leave behind? Is that a clear question? Do you understand? I'm seeing Gina is like, no. Let me try again. That's good. I like the no's. It's more fun that way, right? Why pretend? So picture the world you most want to live in. Oh, okay. We've got Shannon here. We're gonna go for her, and let's see if some inspiration comes around. She is the great grandmother moon, here to help the child of gods awaken through my sacred stories. Ah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Shannon. I love it. So that's not inspiration. And here, I want to play something else, you know, let us be inspired. Let someone else's aliveness and claiming of what they are wake up that inspiration. Sometimes the comparing mind will come in, like, well, I'm not that. Take that comparing mind and throw it out the window. Break the window with how hard you throw out the comparing mind. The comparing mind is the enemy of the state, and it's the enemy of the genius. It has no right to live here. Okay, so you want to be inspired and lifted up by other people's geniuses and be fed by it as it wakens the genius in you. So that's why we celebrate each other's greatness. Amy, I am in comparison to the grieving, and I am the companion. Thank you, sorry about that. To the grieving and sorrowful as they navigate their way through the forest of loss. She's a sacred companion. She's a guide. What is that? You know, a guide to the grieving. You know, in other societies, you know, I wish I knew which tribe this is in Africa, there are professional grievers, and they will come and they will wail for you. You know, and when this first started happening, when COVID first started happening, I saw a lot of people be embarrassed and ashamed about their state of grief. And I want to say, no, 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 no. You guys are those daring ones who can metabolize that which so many others can't. You're creating the compost. You know, grief gives us life. If we can't be bold enough to grieve, sometimes we'll fall into a depression, which is so deadening. But grief, and we can feel the pain, can be enlivening. It's such a weird thing. Shannon says, others right. Yeah. Al says, there are grief doulas out here as well. I know, I love that. We need those. Anyone else want to claim their apocalyptic archetype before we claim the ending of our time? It's a powerful thing to do. Nancy's saying, I am galactic grandma teaching the children to explore the cosmos. I love galactic grandmas. Amazing. I love this. Shannon's saying, yes, and how to play. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I'm going to invite you, keep playing with this. Keep playing with it. Claim it. Play the game with some friends. You know, this is one of my favorite things. You know, rather than go, how are you doing with COVID? You know, it's such a depressing question. Be like, hey, what's your apocalyptic archetype? You know, what's coming alive in you in these times? Not what is being killed by the fear. No, what's coming alive in you? What's emerging through you? How do you want to meet these times? What medicine you got? You know, these are fun questions to ask each other. Jean's saying, I'm a green witch here to heal the world with the herbs and plants of Pachamama. Yay! And Annette is saying, I'm the bridge to the animal kingdom. Ah, yes. We need that. Okay. So, Annette told us a very funny story about the story of COVID as told through the eyes of a golden retriever the other day. One of the best perspectives I've ever heard, just so you know, and very joyful and kind of funny. Karen is saying, Karen Willowwitch, guardian of the forest spirits. Ah, isn't that great? Don't we love the word, that the transformation of from activists to guardians and protectors? Whoa, it's just one little language change, and it's totally transformed not only how we see and receive these people. Right now we want our protectors, activists, pain in the butt, protectors. Oh my gosh, guardians, yes. Sorry, that's for me at least. Quinn is saying, any tips for how to find it? Keep asking. Keep asking. You know, one of the things I love knowing is you know, when you listen to any great talk, a lot of times the talk will begin, well, they'll say, you know, I have this question that kept nagging at me. Trust those questions that keep nagging at you, because it means that there's an answer in you that wants to emerge. It's asking for a place to be. So if you're just keep asking, what is my essence? Or another thing that you can do, this is another fun creative exercise, is you can go to some of your top allies and say, you were given an assignment, you can blame this on me, and say, what is my medicine? What medicine do you receive from me? Just when I walk in the door, not in my doing, not in my job, not in that, but like, what compels you to call me up on the phone? You know, what is me, just me? And you're going to start, and I say, ask at least 3 to 5 people, because then you're going to start to hear the patterns. And some of them you're going to be like, oh yeah, well, that was obvious. And some of them you might be like, oh God, I took that such for granted. I didn't realize that was a gift. I didn't realize that was my medicine. Karen's saying, I used to say queen, but realized that's not where I want to be anymore. I love that. Right, we change our energy, our archetypal energies. And that's like, changing is so important. This is one of my little beefs around climate change narrative I used to be part of. Somewhere along the way, we cast change as the bad guy. How the heck did that happen? How did we cast change as the bad guy when it's the most natural thing that the earth goes through? You know, so it's a very odd thing. You know, be careful of these stories. So I say that because I think of trees, of earth, of stories. I think of stories like trees, and they grow and they grow and they grow and they change because our perspective changes, and we are changed by our stories. So, all right, this was our class for today, and I'm loving these. These are still coming through, and I'm a balance beam, says Elle. not different by COVID or the bubble at a professional level, assuring that movement doesn't ever run out of space. So that was our class today. I'm going to give you a quote because it's always right to end with a quote. And then I'm going to, for anyone who wants to stay and talk about how to continue working story with me, I'm going to talk to you about an amazing class that is coming up right now. And then for those who really want to play with creating a vision story, we'll stay on for just a couple extra minutes and we'll co-create a vision story together. So we could be at this for about another 10 minutes if you stay for the whole ride. Here's our quote. Act as if you're a people of consequence so that I can treat you as such and that you matter. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? It doesn't clink when it hits the ground, but you can feel it. It would be proper to perceive that there is consequence to us being here. It is by Stephen Jenkinson. And so I leave you with that may you know that your stories are of consequence, and every word that you speak is creating and creating and creating. Okay, so that was our class for today. And now, if you are still here, you must be lingering because you just can't wait for me to tell you about what is coming next. And what's coming next is this class called, called Sanctuary. And this is really about the opportunity to come into, I was trying to find a link, but I should not try to find a link because it's not going to work that way. Here we go. It's a class that really was born out of COVID. So I've been teaching for the past 3 years at a school in sacred storytelling. And at first, I was very, very committed to teaching the landscape of storytelling, to make sure that people could understand this ancient art because, storytelling has been very hijacked. It's really is being used against us. And I really felt, and a lot of my, people that were advising me, they're like, yeah, you're so good with this story thing. Why don't you go use it in marketing? And everything in me knew that I was not to use story in marketing. Everything in me knew I could be very successful there. But that it wasn't how I ever wanted to work with that modality. So it's years and years and years of just continuing to listen to understand why. And I really began to understand that it was really understanding that story is a sacred art and we come back to its original relationship to ritual and come back to its original relationship to like ceremony. Then all of a sudden we start to understand how its unique role in the times that we're living in and what it has to offer us when we get to understand again our capacity to be human in relationship to story. So this course was really born out of many years of now teaching online and teaching storytelling and bringing people to the landscape of it, and then really understanding that there comes a moment when it was time to go deep and to deepen the relationship with story and to get and to like, how do we meet the times in the most needed in this moment? So Sanctuary was born because what I started to see was that people needed to understand it wasn't just about telling the story or getting access to the creative muse, but it was really about understanding who they were as creators so they could get over all those hurdles and so that they could really call forth all that they had to give in this world. And so while the overarching course that I teach around storytelling, this first course is really just committed to creators. And what does it mean to be a conscious creator in our time? And so what we're doing in Sanctuary is, and the other thing that I'll speak to is that I've, been creating, professionally now for well over 15 years. And I've, produced professional PSAs and plays and short films and produced large events. And so I really know what it takes to create something. And from start to finish. And I'll tell you, I did this exercise during COVID, really by doing that first exercise that I gave you. I felt the impulse to slow down and to just come back and follow that creative life force. Where was the yes? Where did it want to lead me? And it led me straight into developing this program, is what I'll tell you. And it led me straight into my bedroom, and it said, "You need a sanctuary." And part of the reason why that happened was that one of the people who had been studying with me asked if I would write the guidebook that I do that would share the practices that I had developed over years of writing about how to create psychic silence. So I understand psychic silence as, look, we're surrounded by all the different noise of the world, but when we come into that place of writing a sacred story and coming into relationship with divine and coming into that humble place of listening, I needed all that noise to be quieted. And also I understood that all the physical things around me, they all, matter matters. They all require energy. They take energy. And I started to see that my bedroom needed to be really cleared in order for me to create this book. Because normally I would go away. Normally I would go to some little hut on the edge of the ocean where there was nothing for me to physically relate to, and just come into that quiet place and just write. And it was COVID, and just like you, I couldn't run away. And so I had to figure out how to create that psychic silence and how to create that sanctuary for creation in my own home. And as I started to go through the practice of doing it, this whole process, the strategic process revealed itself to me. And I started to realize, I was like, oh my gosh, this is too much to not share. It's like too good not to share. And I'll even share a picture of it with you, because this ended up being the part of it that I'll actually be sharing with students very, very soon, which I'm really excited about. And what happened was that this book started to reveal itself. And it's not like a book like we would normally think of a book as like in a bound or anything. This is more like the book of your life, the book of your journey, the book of your discovery. And so as part of this class, you get, this is the room that I ended up redoing. This was one of the altars that I ended up creating in this space. And these are the pages that you'll be given. Actually, you'll be given pages that were designed by a beautiful designer, to start to capture everything that's living in your psychic space, so that you can start to really have a command over your unique operating system, or in this case, what we're calling your creator matrix. And I'm just going to show you this page as well. So I gave this to you as a creative prompt earlier. You might want to begin each morning, whether you take the class or not, but for those of us who are taking the class, is what we'll be doing. What does my life force energy want to do today? And then just coming back to that question, what did I actually do? In the first 3 days, I came up with these great, beautiful ideas of what I really wanted to do. And then I ended up, like, at the end of the day, I'd have to go write the truth of what I did. Sat on my computer for 6 hours, and it was like, oh, well, this is interesting, because my life force is saying it wants to do something else. And my behaviors and my patterns are doing something else. So how do I shift and change that? And so this class is really designed to help support you do that. But what I love about it is that it is an entirely embodied practice. And so literally, I got to see in 10 minutes some of my greatest weaknesses and challenges through doing this that I could not hide from. And it liberated me instantaneously, because I could see through the embodied practice of transforming my room into a sacred space, going through the practice of doing it with intention. What is ritual? But it's something that's done with intention. And then also doing ritual in action, where when I started to discover certain things, and then took it straight into ritual and created rituals to transform, that word again, that energy, so I could be freed up and come closer and closer and closer to the life force that wants to come through now. So this class, I know I'm speaking in a very non-linear way. I am giving you the fullest embodiment of the archetype of the storyteller, which is a spider, which is we weave many different layers together. Thank you for laughing, Shannon. And so what this class does is that we meet, I'll try to get linear with you, on Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. For 6 weeks. And you are given this guidebook, the Conscious Creator's Guide to Creating Psychic Silence, that will walk you through this process of creating your space into a sanctuary, and then really managing and handling all the different things that you discover. And what we're doing specifically is we're working through ritual and ceremony to metabolize, to compost, to transform, or to claim and amplify what you're discovering. So for me, I found the role of the complainer. Man, she was all over my bedroom. She had all kinds of complaints. And I had never, it's not like my friends didn't know about it because they were probably onto me, but I had never been able to hear it so clearly when I had decided to stop the show and consciously listen for that which I didn't want to see, hear, or name or claim. And there was a liberation, and when I got to say, oh no, hon, I'm done with you. I'm ready to move to a different place in the clock and take on a different role consciously, you know. So, um, so what we're doing in this time is while you do a considerable amount of committed work outside of class, when we're in class is when we're getting to call what you're discovering and then individually shape the recipes for your specific rituals. We're working with creativity and story as a way to metabolize and make sense of what you're discovering and to move that energy. And so it is, and by the end of the time, you're going to get to have a sense of what is your unique creator matrix. You know, what is your design? Where are your strengths? Where are your challenges? You know, and as you can understand them, then like, what do you need to be supported? And the way that I think of it is like we're in a stallion class. You know, we're going to run so that we can get all that life force up, so that we can get a good gallop on what we're here to do and what we're here to give. And it doesn't mean that there are not going to be boundaries and things for us to have to confront. But when you've got that momentum going, you can see the thing that's in your way, and you can take a nice big leap and go right on over it. And so that's when you can start playing with it. And that's what we do when we start engaging story as a sacred art and as a healing art. Okay, so, okay, so Kay is saying, I'm not quite clear on what you're offering. Is it to help people write a book or refine their personal stories? So, thank you. So this particular class, Sanctuary, is completely committed to seeing who you are as a creator. It's the foundational class for a year-long program that I teach. And the way that it works is that you're going to come out, you're going to, it's literally based sort of on the principles of the ocean. The waves go, the waves, you know, we go in, we go out. So for this one, we go in for the 6-week journey, and we're accompanied by me. You get a small group of 5 other people that are working with you on this journey, that are your team of greatness. And then you also get the assistance and support of 5 master teachers who are teaching you different elements of what it is to really explore and know yourself as a creator and as a conscious creator. Okay, so what it does is it gives you an opportunity to really call, what are you here to give? And get all the stuff out of the way so you can get straight to it. So those teachers, I'll get into in just a second, but in terms of that, then so that 6-week class, that's the going in. Then after that is we take a break, and then we come back for 4 weeks for Mythos. And Mythos is a 4-week class where then we tell the story. And when in that particular class, it's completely telling your personal creation myth. We get to learn creation myths from around the world, and we get to really call and understand all those gifts in the story of your soul. And you get to carry your own creation story. And in that class, we do workshopping, and you get story coaching and all of that. So there are 2 different things, so that makes sense. One is sort of the preparatory class, you know, really dusting off all the corners, literally and figuratively, and really getting to understand who you are on the inside through this embodied practice of changing the world outside of you. And this is what I know is true. When you change what's inside of you, it changes the world outside of you. When you change the world outside of you, it changes what's happening inside of you. It's pretty big medicine. And I'll tell you, it's been one of the most transformational experiences I've ever gone through, getting to go through the process myself and creating this program. The guest teachers, I do want to tell you that, and then we're going to get to the vision story. Sorry for going so wildly over. The guest teachers, we actually have Brooke Medicine Eagle came to us last week, who taught us about ceremony. She's from the Crow tradition, and she also told us the story of White Buffalo. It was really quite beautiful. This week, this Thursday, tomorrow, we're going to meet with Kalila Elaine Dougherty. She runs a Priestess Presence online sanctuary, and she's going to teach us about what is sanctuary in terms of the technology of creating sacred space in your physical space, but also creating sanctuary within. We'll be working with Diane Dubrow, who is holding onto the ancient knowledge of being a scent priestess and working with anointing. So again, that idea of we have the story is a sanctuary. What is it to be the sanctuary, the holder of a temple? And many of the principles of this class are as within, so without, as above, so below, these ancient principles. So that's why we're seeing, we're doing things in the physical space as we become closer and closer and deeper in our relationship in the unseen place, which is where those stories live. And so we're also working with Alika Atai, who is an indigenous farmer from Hawaii, and he's going to teach us about spiritual gardening. And now you're like, gardening for a storytelling class, you know? But the rituals that we do involve planting seeds. And as storytellers, we're gardeners, we're always planting seeds. So again, it's full embodied practice. And then our last teacher is going to be Kristen, and she's teaching us about how to create sacred symbols. So it's a visionary arts class. And so the sanctuary class is you get 6 classes with me that are live and interactive, along with your small group that you might meet with outside of class. And you also get 5 more classes, bonus classes with these master teachers. And so it's a very comprehensive program. And I don't know who you'll be on the other side of it, but I know that it won't be the same. You know, if you really give yourself fully to the program and to the work that it has to offer you. And then on the other side of that is mythos. Then you come out to tell the story, and you'll be able to have something in your hand that you can hold and carry and give away. That's it. Those are, I think, if there are any questions? It's so hard for me to explain because it's a creature, this story. You know, it's not like any other normal class. I've never seen or experienced anything like it, but it sure is what wanted to come through at this time. And we have an amazing group of people that are gathering from around the world. It's really an eclectic group. And so that's one of the things that gives me great pleasure also in it. Okay, so, and the one thing I'll say is that some people have said that they can't change a room in their house, but they really want to do it. I would say the class is designed to change a room in your house, like do it. But like, you know, I have a couple of people who literally can't. And so for them, we're creating something special that they need to make. You do have to have a physical making experience through this because you want to have an embodied expression of having to create something from A to Z in a certain time frame. So if you're curious, but you're, you know, for whatever reason, you can't change the room, you know, just know that other possibilities there for you. And I'll also say class has begun in terms of the first assignment has been given, and we meet officially for the first time next week. And for anyone who signs up for both Sanctuary and Mythos, I add my whole library of master teachers. That's 30 hours worth of extra classes. That's Stephen Jenkinson and Michael Meade and Carolyn Casey, all these people that have been quoting, Charles Eisenstein, Beo Akafat, just amazing people that will really deepen your knowledge and understanding of sacred storytelling. Okay, so that's it. You know in your bones that this is for you. And now let's create a vision story. So the way that we begin is you can take yourself off mute and we're just going to popcorn through. Okay, and when you feel called to say something, you will. And so the first prompt of this is where you start to describe that most beautiful world that, like, imagine yourself 30 years from now. And maybe you don't think that you're going to be alive 30 years from now, but just imagine yourself living in that world 30 years from now. And it is the most extraordinary dream come true for you. It is beautiful. And what you're going to do is you're going to place yourself in that world and you're going to allow yourself to be inspired by what you see. So this is actually some heavy lifting, right? Because a lot of us have been infiltrated with a lot of negative images. So you have to, this might be a muscle workout for your imagination. And what tells you that you are living in the most beautiful world you've ever wanted to see? So, so you say well, the world wasn't always like this, you know, one of the things I love most about living in 2030, gosh, you know, every single street is lined with the most beautiful, amazing orange trees. I mean, there's no going hungry. There's fruit trees everywhere. I am so grateful for those people who planted those fruit trees 30 years ago. So you're just naming one thing that tells you you are living in a beautiful, thriving, healthy planet where all beings can thrive. What tells you that you're there? Just one line. And the more you can get excited about it, the more joy and glee you can like really feeling it, the more you're giving us the transmission, right? You're like, oh God, I want to live in that world.
Leah, the thing that I hear is the laughter of children.
Mm. Okay.
I just love how everything is designed with nature principles in mind, and that we see spirals and we see curves. And so from architecture to street design, everything is nurturing and life-giving.
Beautiful.
I see, as I'm walking about, I see everyone around me relating to everything around me. I see people stopping and talking to a tree or to the birds as much as they're talking to each other. So I see the interconnectedness of all life is back as it once was.
Mm. So now that we have a good idea of this beautiful world that we were living in, that we just love, now we're going to play with, well, the world wasn't always like this. Okay, so now we're playing at this other piece of, well, the world wasn't always like this. You know, can you believe that, you know, so you're talking to a grandchild, you're talking to a young child. Okay, I forgot to say that part. Key to know who's in the story. Can you believe that once upon a time, they were trying to build pipelines through some of the most sacred lands on earth? Well, that didn't happen. You know, so now we're coming back through and we're naming what wasn't working about this time. Okay, can you believe that this used to be in place but isn't anymore? You know, that's kind of that's where we're going with this vision story. Okay.
Can you believe that people used to be crowded into tiny little cubicles and forced to work where there had no natural sunlight for 8 to 12 hours a day, and they didn't get to come out and play and be in the sunshine and listen to their natural rhythms? Sure glad it's not like that anymore.
Great.
Can you believe that all foods used to be brought in from outside? You couldn't just go down to the garden and pick what you wanted.
Can you believe at one time we as a people put poison in our food in the gardens and put poisons in our body to heal?
So great. So now we've played with that, right? In terms of, I'm sorry, was there someone else that was trying to speak? So we planted our vision for what we know what's good. We went back and we claimed that's not happening anymore. And now we're being like, and then you say, then you start to hint, and this is where you have to wildly use your imagination, you know, in terms of being grateful to that person that made some change, and the most unexpected change because of that, you know. So this is where you get to kind of have fun and play, and also you're starting to now carve out the path of possibility to that world that you most want to see, you know. Wow. Well, you know, it was kind of an amazing thing, you know, then when all the rain started to fall, you know, and that rain, as it started to fall, you know, it started to water these seeds that we didn't even know had been planted in the earth. And at first we thought those flooding was just a mess, but lo and behold, it ended up surfacing all these seeds that had been planted all along and nurturing them so they could grow again. So that's an example of really not knowing what you're going to say as you start to open your mouth, allowing the imagination to be like, Oh, why are the clouds showing up? Why does this big rain? Where is it going to carry me? But again, maybe there's also the story gets to speak through you. Oh, what looked like a curse could be a blessing. Oh, all these floodings. What is the other thing that they're doing on the other side that I don't even know about, but I can start to carve out and play with as a storyteller? Don't think about it. Just open your mouth, allow it to come through.
How could we know that the coming of the clouds and the shaking of the earth and the quaking of our hearts was actually the emergence of the one that we are, taking us on the ride of our lives into a future we could not imagine from where we were. Sprouting our pin feathers so that we will rise as the butterfly phoenix dragon that we are, a child of God's, child of Gaia and of Sol. Each one of us a symbol, a self in the body of humanity, rising from the ashes, the compost that we created.
One of the things we do in our classes is we give a little sunshine back when we got something. It feels like an ending. It feels like we got it, unless someone else has something that they wanted to add to our story. All right.